So, um, they are on their way. You know how trash it is this time of day. But I just want to say hello to everyone and thank you for coming out to this meeting today. Just want to have some really good information. Um, and and I know some of you may be familiar with where we were doing the trainings for building a movement to end the new Jim Crow. Part of that training was campaigns. And we started thinking about what type of campaigns we wanted to possibly do here locally. And housing was one of those issues that came up. So Chris Williams was nice enough to, because that's kind of like his baby.
Mic testing 1 2.
Focusing a lot on housing.
Mic testing 1 2.
How it affects people locally.
Mic testing 1 2.
Formerly incarcerated, just people in general. Maybe Chris can give you some background information of how he came about with needed, I can't pronounce her name yet.
Angelika?
Angelika.
I think that's it. We don't really introduce it.
Yeah, how you came about dealing with housing and seeing the need for that conversation
Hi.
here in Lafayette, and
Oh,
how
go
we
ahead.
can get involved to possibly make it better for our community.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sister Councilwoman. And basically, we're talking about Sun Cholo, which is a nonprofit that deals with, we just started actually just about 3 years old, that deals with housing. And one of the things that we know since I've been meeting with both for the last 3 years is that there's always an issue with housing after people return home. And so one of the initiatives that we have is to try to create a safe space for those people that are returning to ensure that they have safe, sanitary, and affordable housing. Housing Louisiana is one of those groups that we'll hear from tonight that's doing some great work around the housing piece. But the challenge that we have is that the public policy centered around housing isn't really going anywhere. So let me give you some examples. In the state of Louisiana, and I'm giving away some of the presentation, but it's estimated that we have about 125 housing units short. That's everything before Katrina, after Katrina, Ida, and all of the hurricanes. That's the snapshot of where we are now. And so it would seem like the public policy would be centered around increasing public policy and appropriations centered around housing. But that's not taking place. Or if it is taking place, it's taking place at a snail's pace. Lake Charles just got a major appropriation where they're going to finally be able to start helping people. But if you go to Lake Charles, there's still a lot of blue tarps. There's still a lot of properties that can never be inhabited again because it's not cost effective to do the rehab. And so, but they just got some major allocations to begin that work. So it's going to take years to get that done. Locally, our local government actually went in the opposite direction. They did, during the pandemic, they did away with the housing appropriations and gave it to small businesses and other groups. And we haven't increased it to the point that it was before. So there's a children set aside that there was an exemption given for. They haven't done that. And they were able to redirect monies to other areas that is not housing related. You may have heard about the $86 million that city and parish government received as a part of our ARPA funds, and always picks up the acronym American Rescue Plan. What is it? I forget what the age for. I'll give it later, but $86 million, and less than 3% of that went to the north side of Lafayette, and none towards housing. The majority of it went towards drainage. And so there has to be some more dialogue taking place about how do we have a paradigm shift in terms of housing, making housing a priority, and specifically for vote, how do we tie that into brothers and sisters who are coming home to make sure that that is not a barrier that exists. And so in a very small way, we're starting to do housing rehabs and to try to have some of those dwellings available where people who are coming out will not get in a situation where they are quote unquote rent dependent. And what we mean by that is simply that they will not pay more than 30% of their verified monthly income in rent. And so we get money from the Louisiana Housing Corporation, for instance. The agreement that we have is that if they give us the money to rehab a home, we can put someone in that home that has been modified, that's been renovated with today's specs and codes, and we'll do the income verification. And if their income is $1,000 per month, their rent will not exceed $333 a month. Because we know that when you start paying more than 30%, a third of your income towards housing, other things are affected. Medication, clothing, education, nutrition, and everything else. The Othering Institute, for those of you that, want to look at this stuff even deeper, the Othering Institute goes even further. Their contention is that every United States citizen's quality of life is dependent upon what kind of house they live in. And their contention is that the house that you live in determines what kind of education you're going to get. It determines how your health is going to be, your mental health, your happiness, your ability for economic sustainability. It's all dependent on your dwelling. And they've started the process of being able to do some studies that show in the California area, areas that are economically distressed in their housing, and then other areas that are middle class and other areas that are affluent, and the other social factors affecting those families. And their contention, which I think has a lot of validity, is that housing is impacts all of those variables. So our work is centered around our very small, and our contention is this, that we as a community have to begin the process of breaking down these barriers, because one instance that we have in Lafayette, for instance, when we start talking about solutions, so we all can identify the problems, what are the solutions? So in Lafayette, we have over 1,200 adjudicated properties, right? And those are 1,200 properties that, for some reason or another, ended up in the government hands. The government is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to mow the grass, cut the trees, and do whatever else. And they've come up with a process to return those properties to nonprofits, citizens who live next door can get those properties. The people that just want to get the properties and buy from the city. So there are various ways to do that. So what we've been trying to do with a series we call Stopping Gentrification and helping the community to get those properties is to teach people how to go to the website. And if you go to this website, the Lafayette Consolidated Government website, and you put up the adjudicated properties map, you'll see these little red squares and odd shapes all over the north side of Lafayette. Because 80 to 90% of adjudicated properties are on the north side of Lafayette. And what it says is that, one, we have that there was a lot of economic stress that exists because we have all those properties concentrated on the north side, but it also presents opportunities. So what we've been asking groups to do is to partner. We're very small. We only, we're just getting started. We only between 10 and 20 properties at this point. We could probably be at 100 in about 5 years. But if everybody do that, we can then begin to have progress. And so our contention is to try to teach people how to do that. So we're gonna have another session. Do you remember the date of the next certification session? Are you there? Yeah, okay. So we'll get that to Consuelo, we'll share it. And so what we do is we simply get a laptop, Tina Sheldon with Nicole Vize, Marjorie Broussard, Sharon Patterson, just take you through a process of seeing where you live or where you're interested. Even if it's just one property, you know, we can begin to make a change in our own community. So whether it's you want to transfer that into a pocket park, or put a dwelling on it, or renovate a dwelling, the overall concept is that we can all work together to improve the housing stock in the city of Lafayette. And I guess I would lastly close with the same thing we do with both with criminal justice reform and the great work that's been done by Power Coalition and over the last several years when there was a workshop in City Club where all of these diverse groups got together. That's what's going to happen with housing, because we can't address what Angelica is going to talk to us about without some partners that want to change the fabric that we live in. You know, my kids was in football and basketball and track for 16 years in middle school and high school. And people would, you know, cheer these kids on, you know, between the football field, between the basketball courts. But when we have to bring those kids home and you saw the dwelling that those kids was living in, you know, it was why can't those people that oftentimes who sat in the audience cheer them on for football and basketball, who are policy setters, who are representatives, who are business leaders, why can't they cheer on them having a safe, sanitary, secure place to live? And that's the paradox that we have. We don't have enough people that are pushing this effort. So I was very pleased that two meetings ago, that vote decided to make housing one of its priorities for this year. That's the discussion we're going to have this evening. And then how do we all advocate to ensure that that people have the best resources possible when they spend a lot of their time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, so he pretty much said it all as to, and like Chris said, you know, housing affects all of us. I mean, if someone can imagine why this particular subject is so important, I just want you to imagine yourself not living in the house that you're living in, whether you're living in a shelter or having to live with someone else, a family member or a friend. Just imagine what your state of mind would be like, not having a home of your own, a roof over your head, somewhere for you to go after work or after school or after any activity and be able to say, I'm going home to watch some TV, lay down, go to sleep. And just imagine if that is a disruption in your life and you don't have that anymore, and how much that would affect your mental stability. It would affect you emotionally, mentally, physically, having a roof over your head. And that's one of the reasons every time I see someone who is experiencing homelessness, it breaks my heart because I still can't wrap my mind around how is that happening in this country? How is that possible? And to go even further than that, if I see a veteran, someone who served this country, protected this country, is experiencing homelessness, I really get mad because I'm like, there's no way
something like that should be happening to someone who served and protected this country. There's no way that should happen. And when those conversations, when people are having conversations about homelessness, and you know, I heard someone make a comment one day. I wanted to, but I just was like, some people made the comment. They made the choice to live like that.
No.
I was like, wow. So there's a percentage of people who think that way. Not just me. There are some people who think that homeless people chose to live that way. And I'm like just flabbergasted when I hear something like that. But I often remind people, I say, do you realize we're all that far from homelessness?
Right.
Because we never know what could happen to our homes. A fire, some type of disaster, hurricane, even Hurricane Alley, you know, anything can happen. And then you find yourself without your home. You're having to live with someone or reside in a shelter for however long. No one planned that. Or if someone has a mental breakdown and just not taking their medication, and you know, they're just not really paying attention to bills, they somehow end up losing their home. They're suffering with PTSD and whatever type of mental illness, and they lose their family, and then turn around and lose their home, and next thing you know, you see them on the corner with a sign in their hand. And for someone to say, oh, they chose to live that way, you don't know what that person is going through or what they went through to even be in that predicament. My heart always goes out to those people that I see. I just immediately start praying for them and praying for the givers that give them money or feed them. Because these are human beings, number one. Human beings. I don't care what they did, where they're from, they're human beings. And that's the part that our government, our local government, our federal government has to really start thinking about more than dollars. We are talking about people, people's lives. And I was just recently telling someone, because housing is a huge issue for people coming out of prison, and how one lady I know, she spent 32 years in prison. When she went to apply to get a home, they were ready to, you know, put her in the house. And then she asked, oh, are you a convicted felon? You ever been convicted of a felony? She was like, well, yeah. And she was like, oh, but we can't give you this house. And so she had to continue to look for somewhere to live, for someone to accept her with a felony conviction to be able to live in her home, in a house. And it's so many people like that. Because when we come home, I include myself because, I was incarcerated for 22 years. I didn't own a home before going to prison. When I came home, I was technically homeless because I was living with someone else. I was living with my sister. I was living with family until I was able to get on my own feet and to get an apartment. So if that happened with me, all the other men and women coming out of prison, all these folks are technically homeless unless they have their own home. Some do. Some are blessed to have that. They had established homes before they left or before they were incarcerated. But it's a small percentage. So we come home, the very first thing we're concerned about is, where am I going to live? Who am I going to live with? After living in dormitories with perfect strangers for years, with different roommates, all these different personalities, you want a peace of mind, first of all. Somewhere that's peaceful, without the drama and the chaos that often goes on within the prison settings. But if you can't find that peace of mind, you don't want to live with this person because they always talk about, oh, you need to get a job. They want you to have a job immediately. Oh, you need some money. You got to put some money on the food. And, they're expecting you to have it all together as soon as you get out of prison. They're impatient. But they were there for you when you went to the pardon and parole board. They spoke up for you. They convinced the parole or pardon board to release you. But then you get home and that welcome home party, you don't smell that cake or that food from that party anymore. That welcome is gone. It's like, okay, you gotta get a job. You gotta put some money and some food in this house, or you gotta go. It happens all the time. And that's not just with people coming out of prison. There are people that go through things who've never been to prison and may have to live with a family or a friend for a while until they get reestablished, and they experience the same things. Some of these people are the people you see in the shelters. They're not choosing to live that way. Sometimes it's probably the best thing for them to do at that time. But we know that, the issue is there. Like Chris said, people do experience homelessness. And I hear people from Arch talk about, they're still trying to figure out how to really help homeless people. They still haven't figured it out yet, what to do. There's so many people. What can we do? What do we do? How do we bring these people, into the shelter? We let them sleep at night. We give them something to eat. At a certain time, they got to get out of there. They got to go. They can't sleep in bed all day. They got to get out. Go somewhere, anywhere but here, but be back for 6 o'clock if you want a bed. So just imagine that living.
I just wanted to add to the groups that you mentioned, veterans and the mentally ill and those who come out of prison. We have to remember almost all victims of domestic violence are homeless. And we always think of, well, they're going to shelter to go to where they can go to their family. But that's not always the case. Until you have a woman and maybe your children. I know that men sometimes are victims too, but those people are on the street.
Yep.
I don't know, how many of you all know that the Salvation Army, when I first came here, they used to house homeless people. And now their building has been condemned. And those rooms that was available to those homeless people is no more available. The other thing is there's money for that project, but they can't find land, from my understanding, to build a new Salvation Army. They want to put it on the south side, but people want to keep it on the north side where it's located on 6th Street. But I don't hear anybody talking about it. And that was a spot where homeless people could go.
Right.
But nobody is talking about that. That building just sitting in those rooms are condemned, unsafe. I just brought that up because I know when I first came here, there were rooms available for the homeless at the South. I used to volunteer at the Salvation Army. And when I did some little research, when I found out that they had condemned those rooms, and they were talking about rebuilding the Salvation Army. They had a spot, but somehow that went under the rug. It's not being talked about. Or they don't have the location, or now they don't have the money. That's what I heard yesterday. But before, there was money available for to build the Salvation Army. But now you're saying there's no money. So what happened to the money that was allocated to build? Because I worked the streets for ringing bells for the Salvation Army 3 years in a row before COVID came. So I know there was money because the major that was in charge of it during that time, I worked with him. So there was money for that. Now there's no money. Just want to throw it out there.
We have to be careful that our public policy doesn't demonize the homeless, right? That, when a local government decides to put up signs that say, don't give money to these people, right? They're sending a conscious message about the others. And the others are those people that they have deemed doesn't deserve a response from government, right? And so, so when Josh puts those signs up, it speaks not only to the local government's mentality, but those of us who care about it we have to have some pushback at a council meeting or at a vote meeting or at some total meeting to be able to say that that's just not right. That when the Constitution has, the Supreme Court has ruled that those individuals are in the public domain and they have a right to be there. But until it's challenged, if the citizenry doesn't challenge it, it becomes the norm. So first you put up the signs, then you redirect the housing money, and then you don't make housing a priority, and then you're just pushing money to drainage because some developer decided to go build an exclusive subdivision in a sugarcane field. Who's going to question that public policy, right? And that's why I welcome to these meetings, because we can have those discussions about what type of actions we can take.
One other thing, at the city council meeting, you have the parish and you have the city. And I started attending these meetings because I want to learn for myself.
Sure.
But there's a part on their agenda where for the parish, and they're at the end of all the apartments that they can approve or disapprove or whatever, there's a spot on there where anybody can go before the parish and talk about these things that we are talking about now. Now, I noticed in the meeting that I've been going to the city council, no one is talking about these things that we are addressing here, some of the meetings. And I would like to know why that we don't take that opportunity to go to the city council meeting and on that part where say come in, you can talk about whatever you want and bring those issues that we're talking right now to the city council, to the job, and those people who need to be here what we're talking about now. Now that's a start right there for us. You got to have resources. See, that's a start right now to start attending these city council meetings and getting on that agenda on what we're talking about now and let them people know, look, we here, we need help and we need your help. But if we don't go before that city council board or whatever and throw these items, this agenda out to them, they're just gonna continue to sit there. They're gonna say they don't care. They don't come to the meetings. And I go in and I always sit to see who comes in,
Right.
what members comes in. They don't show up. So that's one thing that we need to start doing is going to the city council meeting. We need to be on This side with us sitting out there, letting them know that we care about our community, we care about the homeless. There was an ordinance on the last city council meeting that was knocked down. Couldn't get a yes vote,
Couldn't get a second.
couldn't get a second.
Did not get a second.
So what is this all about? We got to start going to the city council meeting and we got to voice our concerns for the same thing that we're talking about right now. If we don't do that, we still gonna be talking and talking. They're not taking us serious. That's what I see.
Right,
I just wanted to say that.
It even made it more difficult because at one time, you could, go at a council meeting and you could have public comments at the end of the parish and at the end of the city. But when we were basically fighting for the parks, when the parks closed, they decided that on one day you go and address the parish, and another day you go and address the city in the public comments. And they reduced the time. They reduced the time of the meeting, and they reduced it. So now, if I want to discuss something, if I want to have a public comment for the parish, I have to come maybe the first Tuesday. And if I want to address the city, I have to come on the third Tuesday, making it more difficult for us to engage. But I will tell you that public comments have been used strategically to arrest the meeting, to just put it to a halt. But because there's a time frame now, you can't do that.
3 minutes.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the time of the actual meeting. So if you remember when the parks were closing, those meetings were till 11, 12 o'clock at night because we had public comments. We had everybody making a public comment. Move the Mindset was instrumental in getting that statue moved by the public comments. They had 5 or 6 people to talk every night, every meeting for that. But because the meeting themselves is at a time limit, it would be difficult to use that strategy again.
I noticed that because they start at 4:30, and then they go from 4:30 to 5:30, and then sometimes they run over the time. And then when they go over the time, then you got the city come out. And then I noticed this last time, they went into a special session, where we all sitting out there waiting, and that was loss of time. Because someone could have been speaking during that time, but when they go in that private section, you got to sit and wait till they come back out. So,
I just want to add real quickly that meeting you had, we were there to talk, but when they didn't second it, they wouldn't let us talk, right?
So that is one of the things that vote member policy team wants to be able to do, is for us to be able to get trained, for us to meet our local government, build relationships with them, whether we're visiting their office, setting up meetings to have conversations with them. We're attending those meetings, which I'm hearing now are kind of null and void. They don't, they're making it hard for the people who elected them into office to say what they need to say so they can hear what they need to be hearing. So to me, it seems like meetings, or they need to be invited to our meetings. We need to be arranging, setting up meetings to go to them, and having these conversations, because if it's not going to be able to take place at the council meetings, we have to find another way to do it. Right. It's always more than one way to do it. Yeah.
One of the things that Lafayette prides itself in, or tried to pride itself in, is we're one city, one Lafayette, one Acadiana, 111. And I think that they need to be embarrassed, okay? And one of the ways you do that is have some type of show of protest, of solidarity, when people are visiting that City Hall, when people are coming to talk to do business, you know, wanting to start a business, wanting to move to Lafayette, they need to be shamed. You know, they beg us for engagement, and then they make the rules difficult to engage them.
Right.
So, you know, it's really,
And with stuff like that, we have to strategize. We have to put our heads together and come up with a strategy that, you know, will be effective to get the results that we're trying to get. It may not come. I was like, voting is a right. He was like, no, it's not. I said, yes, it is. No, it's not. If it was a right, they could never take it from you. I was like,
Well, that's not true. I mean, they take life away all the time. They just took away.
but if it's a right, they should never be able to take it from you.
Sure.
It's more of a privilege if they can take it. That's just like if, you know, you punish your kids for doing something they had no business doing and you take their phone. That phone is a privilege to you. I'll give it back to you when I feel like it. Or when you do what I need you or said that you're supposed to do. I give it back to you. That's a privilege. A right is something that can never ever be taken away. Then I start thinking, I'm like, there's a lot of so-called rights that are really more privileged than right because they take it. My gun rights, I'm a convicted felon, I no longer have those rights. I can't own a gun. I can't possess a gun to protect myself because I'm a convicted felon. So that right that, you know, the folks that are all about gun ownership and gun possession, that's my right to own a gun. It ain't my right.
I don't think there's any right
Truly illegal. No, I mean, it all depends on the things that we can work some of the privileges to be correct. We agree with that. We do not something like that. It's supposed to be right.
right, exactly.
But it turned out to be right.
So I believe our guest is about 5 minutes out. Miss Julie prepared some delicious spaghetti and meat sauce, green salad, garlic bread, all that good stuff. So you guys can go ahead and grab you a tray and take you a quick break until our guests get here, all right? All right. That works.
I'm Renika Morris, A-N-D-R-E-A-N-C-I-A, Morris, M-O-R-R-I-S. I am the president of Housing.
So tell me a little bit about why you're putting on this event.
Well, we're working with the community on hosting this event. We're really excited to be working with partners like Vote, as well as some local leaders here in the Lafayette and Mount area to talk about disaster recovery. You know, this community has been so hard hit over the last few years, like a lot of southern Louisiana, unfortunately. And it's not getting the attention it deserves. It's not getting the investment it needs. And there's a real simple ways of changing that. It starts with educating communities so that they understand the power that they already wield, so that they can hold those who do hold the purse strings accountable and get them to make the right investments.
So I'm sure you're going to speak about it tonight in your
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah.
But for viewers at home, what are some of the things that people can do to try to seek out if they invest in income?
So everybody's got to get ready for the fact that there's an election coming up in the fall. And there's people on the ballot, like the Public Service Commissioner, which is not a job that a lot of people know anything about. Those folks have a lot of control on how resources, not just get the money gets doled out, but the systems that are in place that make the funding work better. think about being without power for so long, looking at the grid, looking at our systems. The Public Service Commissioners play a big role about that. So do our congresspeople. Most of the funds that are going to be necessary after any kind of disaster, be it a hurricane or COVID or a tornado, are going to come from the federal government, and our congresspeople have to do a better job. The Louisiana delegation currently only has about 1 or 2 members that can be consistently counted upon to vote on the kind of money that the people of Louisiana often desperately need. That's got to change, and we can change that, and the people can change that. With family members and friends in the Lafayette area because they can't go home. And that puts a burden on Lafayette, Okaloosa, and the other surrounding communities. And you also have to be stronger after COVID, and there's been a serious here in Lafayette.
I've seen her from afar and so privileged to work with her now and learn from her in terms of all of the knowledge that she has as it relates to housing in our state. Because you know when she says it, you know that it's facts and it's coming from a great source. So with that, I'm going to introduce our brother Brandon Cables.
Thank you guys for giving us your space and your time. We truly appreciate it here at Housing Louisiana. Tonight's presentation or discussion is going to be centered around this fact sheet that I gave everyone today. They have a sign-in sheet going around. I'm pretty sure, to echo Dr. Chris, we are going to build some power up in this place and have some hard discussions, but also have some of this information is definitely going to be eye-opening. And what our leader, our fearless leader at Housing Louisiana does is break this stuff down in a way that's digestible for us all, but also be able to start the conversation on how we can hold our politicians and our leaders accountable. So without further ado, I want to introduce our president, Angelica Morris. She has been doing this housing justice work for too long, but not long enough. Not long enough. So I'll pass it off to you, and you can introduce yourself and let people know like how long you've been doing this work and everything that you need to do. But without further ado, Angelica Morris.
Thank y'all so much. I think y'all can hear me. I don't think it's on, but y'all can hear me, right?
Yeah.
I turned it. There we go. Now it's on. So I can project really well. So I'm not even shouting. So good evening, everyone. Thank y'all so much for inviting us here. We apologize. We appreciate the grace that y'all offered us with being late and everything like that. But we still have to apologize because it was not how we intended to show up here, and the traffic was not good. And we had to get gas. They gave us a rental that was only a third full. So so there was some things conspiring, but we were glad to be here, and we will talk about this for as long as y'all want to talk about it, but we're not going to waste a lot of your time. As Brandon mentioned, we want to go over this fact sheet, and Brandon had asked me to give y'all a little bit of my background. I have been doing this since I've been working in housing since I graduated from college. It was not my first choice of career, but it is where I've spent my entire professional life. First starting with the Housing Authority of New Orleans, learning from the ground level on what it meant to provide or attempt to provide or intend to provide safe, decent, affordable housing for about 1/4 of the city's population. Trying to address the needs for about 1/4 of the city's population, we were only providing housing for about 20%, about 15%, but we needed to help about 25%. And moving through there, we're going to after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, moving into the private sector, still working on development and moving on the other side of rebuilding public housing in particular, as well as creating homeownership opportunities and programs. And then finally moving to the work that I do now, which is advocacy. It is, in my opinion, the next evolution of the work and where it needs to be. And I've learned over that time that there's a set of systems in place that do not work to serve the most vulnerable, despite the fact that the most vulnerable are often associated with it. system does not serve people when they are at their worst. And it is a system that we allow to other people who need it. And unfortunately, the way things are evolved and where we live in Louisiana, we often find ourselves as regular everyday people needing housing at the worst possible moment. And it not being available. And what we have learned is if you educate people and help them understand that that moment that is coming as a result of a tornado or a hurricane or a pandemic for you is just a Thursday for other people because the system is not designed, frankly, to work. And we can fix that. There is enough resources, there's enough money, there's enough opportunity for everyone to live exactly wherever they want in this great country, certainly in this great state, and in this community here in Lafayette and Opelousas and the surrounding communities. That is a fact, right? The scarcity model that we attribute to housing is not true. It's not real. And it's a game that we have fallen for because it helps people, frankly, keep their foot on the necks of other people. And here in Louisiana, unfortunately, because of our climate, because of our economics, we often find ourselves, those of us who don't struggle with homelessness, those of us who don't struggle with the traditional issues of don't live in public housing, that we think of as these are the folks who have housing problems. When it happens to us, we don't know how to. We're like, wait, it should be working for me. It should be, and it's not. And we've got to fix that. So what we have come to understand is that the best and easiest thing to do is to educate community about these disparities and talk to you about what you can actually do. We don't want to just get you mad, right? You know, we want you to know who you need to be mad at and talk to you about the opportunities for you to hold them accountable. Elections, there are elections coming up that directly connect to the, and it's, again, we want people thinking about this. How many of you know that your public service commissioner is on the ballot for many of your public service commissioners, depending on where you live, what district you live in? How many of you know what the PSC is, the Public Service Commission? Okay. How many of you are struggling with your light bill or groaning when you see your light bill every month for the last couple of months? So the Public Service Commission regulates all utilities in the state of Louisiana, except in a few communities, well, namely really only New Orleans because it's regulated there by the city council, but everywhere else is the Public Service Commission. And how many of y'all know that in New Orleans, the city council passed an ordinance a few months ago, and said to Entergy that they could not cut anyone's lights off because of how hot it is and how desperate it is because they couldn't pay. How many of y'all know that the public service commissioners that represent you refuse to entertain such a motion? So, yeah, so not only, and again, I'm not gonna say the city council, the New Orleans City Council is perfect. They're not, but when community is organized, when community is informed, that came as a result of community pushing the New Orleans City Council and saying, you are our regulators, you can do your jobs, you need to provide us with some relief. We cannot get through summer. And imagine, having your lights cut off, and while it's cooled down a little bit now, it's not so long ago, everybody remembers what that was like. Yeah. And there also needs to be a plan to help people when that moratorium is ended, so that they're not facing hundreds or thousands of dollars of utility bills and then not able to pay, and then they're in a worse trick bag. And we feel confident that the New Orleans City Council is going to respond to that, but we've got to hold their feet to the fire. But why isn't the Public Service Commission doing the same thing? So, New Orleans is often seen as this island, but it's not that far away from here. And what about our neighbors in Jefferson Parish? They're also under the Public Service Commission. They don't have the same protection. You go to the river parishes, you go to Baton Rouge. So why isn't the rest of the state, why aren't your representatives doing that? And when I want to be clear with you, the Public Service Commission refused to do this. They were asked to do this, but they were not asked with loud enough voices. There were not enough of the folks who represent, who will be voting for them in the fall there. It was some of the same old people, some of the same people they hear from all of the time. And you all have to be there. And you all have to send a clear message to them. So that is what we are going to be talking about today, those kind of opportunities for action, as well as information that we know y'all are not aware of. Things are happening, and there's ways of fixing it. So we're going to go over this. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible because I want to have more of a conversation with you all. You know, we do want to share information, but we also want to have a conversation so you can, because this works best when you can connect it to your life, right? What's happening with the Public Service Commission is something that is easy for us to click with people, because again, we're in the middle of summer, lights are gonna get cut off, it's hot, you know, and then we're about to head into a winter. We now live in a place where we actually have really severe winters, and people are not even getting, you know, I remember when levelized billing was introduced, and some people are like, oh, that'll help because when we have we used to have winter months where utility bills were lower, right? Not anymore, right? Not anymore. It's kind of consistent. So it doesn't mean that just because the PSC didn't act in the summer, y'all are going to need that protection in the fall. Y'all are going to need that protection next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. So we don't want you to go, well, I missed it. No. They will be elected for 6 years, right? So you'll have plenty of opportunity to hold them accountable, and you need to remember that. So we wanted to go over the data here because this gives you all a fact sheet of data points. Again, not just to make y'all mad, but to have y'all understand what's happening in your communities. And housing is an issue that a lot of people struggle with in silence, and we don't need you all to stand up and say, oh, I'm struggling with this. If you can, you want to, you should. But it's also an issue that people just don't think about. And it's one of the reasons I'm so grateful for our partners at VOTE, because this is also an issue that's at the heart of any successful reentry, right? You're talking about people coming home. What are they coming home to? And how easy is it for them to do this? And we often, in housing, kind of paint this fairy tale picture in our minds, whether someone who's incarcerated has a family member who can make room for them. Let's look at some of the numbers that those family members are facing, right? So in Lafayette Parish, on page 2, you all can see the median value of homes. Median value is exactly dead center in the middle. So 50% of the houses in Lafayette Parish are worth less than 192, and 50% are worth above. So who in the world can afford a $192,000 house, right? And also look at the rent. Rent is $874, and down at the bottom you'll see that we have what we call the outer reach calculation from our partners, the National Working Housing Coalition. In order to afford the average rent in Lafayette Parish, you need to be making, a household needs to be making $17.33 an hour. Right, that's what these numbers mean, and a lot of people don't, wait, I see, and y'all can ask questions. Y'all can ask questions if you want to raise your hands and ask questions so we can drill down on those numbers. Yes, ma'am? No, I know you're horrified, you look horrified, but I don't know if it's a part of the question too.
You said 17,000?
$17.33 an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, per hour, but what is minimum wage?
Right.
$7.25.
So even if you have 2 people working $7.25 an hour, that's gonna be not quite $15 an hour, it's $14.50 an hour. That's still off the $17.33 an hour the household needs to make to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. And let me talk you through that number, how we came to that calculation so y'all can understand it, because people don't think about this, they don't do the math. We tell low to moderate income people, we tell folks that they just should work a little harder, and this is why it's so important for us to do the math. So over the years, we have adopted an affordability calculation saying you should not spend more than 30% of your gross income on your total housing costs. I personally think that number is too high, and but we're working on a separate calculation, a separate campaign to get the number lowered. But for now, everybody, be it your banker, anybody total housing costs. That includes their utilities. The reason for that is you gotta have something left. You haven't eaten. You gotta hold the number, the housing number, which is the biggest expense you're going to have, rightfully so. It's the foundational piece. But you gotta have something left to eat. Transportation. We tell low to moderate income people, we tell poor people all the time they should save. And people should get to thrive.
Right.
So, but even with doing that calculation, with $1,000 a month, which is something, and again, we got a lot of senior citizens trying to make do on $700 a month, or $600 a month. Yes, sir.
That 30%, or that 30% number, is that always been that way? Because I seem to remember that it was 25% when I was younger. Is the 30%?
So you're older than me.
Recognized?
No, I'm teasing you.
I'm in my mid-50s, so back then.
Yeah.
So yeah, it used to be 25%. It's never been, it is, again, it's one of the crazy things about how we study economic policy and we talk about some of these numbers sometimes. It was a rule of thumb, right? That it was kind of like, your 2 months salary should be what somebody pays on an engagement ring, right? The 25% was a rule of thumb, that you shouldn't spend more than one check. So this goes back to when people got paid every week. Right. You shouldn't spend more than one check on your total housing cost. So that's how we got to the 25%. It wasn't like really examined with economic data or anything like that. So it was that, so the policies, when the fair housing laws got put into place after the civil rights, after Dr. King was assassinated, that actually got codified. The 25% got codified in federal housing subsidy.
But it seems like we're just letting the number go higher.
So we didn't let it go higher. It was very deliberate. In 1980, in 1981, when Ronald Reagan became president, they gutted HUD. They cut a lot of HUD. When people lament the state of public housing and how these programs somehow magically no longer are transitional, like people who are familiar with public housing when it was first put in and talk about it was for veterans and people coming back from the world wars and how people moved there and moved out. What they don't know and they don't understand is that there were supportive, number one, it was 25%, the number was lower. Number two, there were wraparound supportive services to help people actually transition. There were other programs to help people, mainly white people who lived in public housing, were given a chance to buy houses. And all of that stopped in the early 80s. Those programs were cut. And the Reagan administration arbitrarily increased the number from 25% to 30% to save money in HUD's budget so that they could cut HUD's budget. That was it. That's what happened. So the number is, that's why I don't like the number, because it's not rooted in anything, like you can look at it and you can say, well, somebody can make do with those numbers. Not really. And again, it's 30% of your gross. So nobody takes home their gross. So it's closer to 40 and 50% of your take home. So it's still a struggle. And then the other thing is, even with these numbers, it is disconnected from the housing market. Again, what's the median rent? $874. So if you make $1,000 a month, that number doesn't work. If you make $2,000 a month, that number doesn't work. That's why you need to be making about over $17 an hour to make these numbers work. And so it's why when we talk about, while we are great proponents of living wage, we have to also be talking about what's a livable wage. And then we also have to recognize that some businesses, and I'm not gonna give people an out to pay a living wage, but I'm gonna say some businesses can't pay some of these numbers. So why aren't we talking about increasing the subsidies necessary to close the gap, right? Some people can't work hard enough to do this. We often hear this, particularly when we talk about the formerly incarcerated, we'll say, well, we just need to get them home and they need to get a job. Our system turns loose 16-year-olds and 80-year-olds. Do they need to look at jobs? So that they can have a home? Foster care children,
right? We have a policy in place where kids can opt to stay in foster care until they're 21. Y'all know any 22-year-olds who can go out and get a $17 an hour job? So why aren't we making, you know, why are we making sure that they're housing for these folks? And Dr. Chris?
Have you seen any changes in the Biden administration?
So we are hopeful that we're going to see changes. One of the things that we're seeing that we're cheered about is addressing some of the issues with homeownership. You got to start with somebody who's a strong renter, right? You got to have someone who's been able to save, someone who is not stressed and struggling. And renters are such a key part to particularly the wealth building proposition. Let me tell you why. So you become a homeowner, and we talk about generational wealth. So one of the reasons why we appreciate some of the decisions that the Biden administration has made, because for the first time in a long time, we've got federal policy looking at how do people keep their homes in the long run. Because that's a big problem. Like we celebrate, one of the things that happens when somebody says, well, yeah, I'm going to talk about first-time home ownership, and they're not really talking about home ownership prevention, they're not talking about energy displacement, they're not talking about insurance, they're not talking about taxes. They're not worried about helping people really keep their home for the long run. Because that's the only way it becomes generational wealth, right? It's not wealth when the first person lives in it. It's not going to be a wealth building proposition. Because people think, oh, no, we can get the house and it'll appreciate in value and then you can sell it. That's not wealth because you need somewhere to stay. Right. You still need somewhere to stay. It is the strong foundation for that family and where the kids can, that asset can appreciate modestly. They can refinance it to fix it up. They can pull money out of it to help the kids move on. And then it becomes wealth when that person dies and it's passed on to the children. And it becomes a real wealth builder when you do what with the next. What do you have to do with it for it to really be really wealth in the long run? You got to rent it to somebody else. Selling it is fast, easy money that you like nobody. Again, the ideas of like punching out and selling it for millions of dollars or something like no, it's an investment that will take care of the next generation and provide a home for other people. So this starts and ends and is nurtured with renters. But we disrespect renters so much in this country, right? And again, everybody doesn't want to be a renter. Everybody can't be a renter. So why not? They're customers. They're your customers. They also will help you build wealth. So the Biden administration, but what people don't understand is the policies that are created, that are inspired by the disdain of renters, also hurt homeowners, right? And so because they tell you, no, you don't want that dirty subsidy. You don't want to be like those renters. You want to work hard. You bought your house. You want to go in. You got your piece of the American dream. You can do this. But the deck is stacked against you, especially here in South Louisiana, where we're dealing with hurricanes and we're dealing with insurance rates that are out of control. And also, another secret I wanted to make sure everybody understands, one of the things that we've got to do when we talk about dealing with insurance is we've got to do a couple of things. We've got to talk about addressing climate change so that these storms don't become more intensified. We've got to increase the quality of our houses and make them stronger. And we've got to have more people living in our communities to share the risk. We live where we live. The risk is, we can manage and mitigate the risk to a certain extent. But the only other thing that we can do to get insurance costs down is to share the burden with more people. If there are less people living in your community than there were 5 years ago, your insurance rates are going to be higher no matter what you do. Because who is here to share the burden, right? These are math numbers. And we don't think about that because we don't make our elected officials think about those things. We've got an insurance commissioner who's up for election next year who believes that his obligation to create affordable insurance is making sure that there are insurance companies willing to write insurance policies in your communities, no matter what they charge you. That is his stated philosophy on affordability around insurance. Does not matter what it costs you. His obligation is to make sure that there are private companies willing and able to charge you the most that they want to charge, regardless of whether or not you can pay for it or not. It exists. Therefore, it is affordable. Is that not the craziest thing you've ever heard in your life? And he will tell you all when he's coming back next year to run for office, he'll tell y'all how y'all should shop. My favorite story of his is when he told us, we were sitting with a group of people a few years ago, a group of nonprofit leaders, and he shared with us the story about how he, and this was such a bad story, but I'm gonna repeat it because it's so perfect, about how he renovated his kitchen for his wife, like we in the 50s. And he spent $80,000 on the kitchen. Right, I was like, read the room. Okay, we talking to people who build houses where, you know, I have personally sold people houses for less than $80,000. Good houses. Good houses. So I'm like, okay, but you spent $80,000 on a room. And when he went to get the insurance, you know, he notified his insurance company, his rate went up, and he was like, oh, so he called his insurance agent and said, I need you to shop this around for me, they can't know it's me. And he found a cheaper policy. That was the story you wanted us to, after spending $80,000, you still wanted a deal, like you still wanted a deal, like you couldn't handle it. And you, as the insurance commissioner, was forced to shop and find a cheaper policy, and you were able to do it. Yeah, no, like that's not and again, this is part of his philosophy, and we are not holding him accountable, right?
Telling people they can fight with companies all they want.
No, that's correct. That is correct. That is very correct. They are the insurance commission is actually trying is not the right word. They've offered some alternatives that we frankly do not think much of, and it's one of the programs that I wanted to make sure we talk to you all about. On the back page, on page 6, there's a couple of programs and funding opportunities out there that I wanted to make sure we highlighted for you all, and the one is the Insurance Fortified program. So state statute, it's actually written into state statute that if your roof is reinforced to a certain set of standards, one of the things that's been so exciting about doing this work over the time that I've been doing it is that we have actually developed the technology to address a lot of these problems. 15 years ago, we didn't know how to do this. We know now that you can make a roof. So y'all, we've all lived through hurricanes and tornadoes and stuff like that. The big thing that happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, y'all a lot of galvanized steel roofs around here? Right. They love peeling up, don't they? Mm-hmm. Right? They roll back like a tin can. Right. And regular roofs do too. When there's a storm, that's when we have all the blue tarps and stuff like that. But it's also more problematic than that. You can have a house that largely will survive the storm, but if they've lost enough shingles, you're going to have significant damage from the water just coming in from the roof. And on top about it, you're gone for a few days, you have to evacuate, and there's more rain afterwards, right? There's always, every time we have one of these events, there's always like a massive rainstorm right after, right? That just makes it worse. And so we have developed a technology where you can reinforce the roof, and it will hold together better, and it will help, protect the house in the long run against, I believe it's category 1 and 2, and sometimes some parts of 3 storms, right? And making sure that the roof will hold together. It costs about an extra, depending on the size of the house, about another $9,000 on top of what a brand new roof would cost. So not too bad, but not something that everybody's got lying around if you indicate, because you look at the blue tarps on people's houses, right? So the statute says, so if you get one of these new must be reduced because you've mitigated the risk, right? Not a lot, but some you've seen the mitigation of risk. This is a program, Alabama is running this program, and they're seeing about 38 to 45% reduction in their wind and hail policies. Now, that's just the wind and hail policy of the storm, of the premium. But that could be $100, $200 a month, depending on how much you're spending, right? That could be real savings, especially if you've seen a big increase recently. So the statute's been on the books for a while. The insurance commissioner decided that they wanted to stand up a program that would give people access to the money to make the upgrades to their roofs. Great idea, right? So, but unfortunately, and this is where the accountability piece comes in, the program is badly designed and badly conceived. Number one problem, they only got $10 million. When the insurance commissioner introduced it, he only saw $10 million that people were like, no, we want some more money. The legislature in their infinite wisdom reduced that $10 million from $2 billion. So we got another problem there. We got to check the legislators too. And the other problem that we had with this, there's two other big problems. The insurance commissioner did not make any recommendations that need be a qualifier. So basically, if you knew about it, and the program's not going to start, so y'all haven't missed anything yet. The program's not going to start until January. So if you didn't know about it, the money could be gone. And so we think that that's a big problem. And the biggest problem, in our opinion, is the insurance commissioner, the office of the insurance commissioner, is not making any recommendations to the insurance companies on how much of a reduction they have to give. They're going to let each company decide on their own.
You give 1%, that's a reduction.
We're like, no, you got it, and they copied this program from Alabama, except for the parts that would really help. You know, like the amount of money that Alabama is putting into it, the amount of recommended reductions. Yeah. So the good news is that the insurance committee for our legislature is going to be promulgating these rules. It's going to be designing the final rules over the next few weeks and months. So you have time to engage. Because our legislators didn't fix this program. They made it worse, which I was like, I didn't think this program could get any worse, and they found a way to make it worse. So they can make it better. They can put more money into it, and they can say to the insurance commissioner, yeah, no, you're going to have to do your job, and you're going to have to make these people. And one of the problems that we're finding is the statute is already on the books, and so people are you can actually do this on your own if you have the money. And Louisiana Citizens Insurance of Last Resort is not giving people discounts.
Oh, wow.
So we're already seeing some problems. So we're always like, okay, no, y'all gotta make sure this actually works. And our legislators in Brandon and our partners at Vote, the Power Coalition, we're gonna make sure y'all know when we know about the meetings with the legislature, y'all are gonna know about it because y'all need to call your legislators. We're gonna get the list together. We're doing that right now of everybody who's on the insurance committee. And we want to let the communities know, hey, your legislator, not everybody's legislators on this committee, but who is representing the area that you can put your hands on. And also, even if your legislator isn't on the committee, you should call your legislator and say, hey, can you call your colleague? And you can also ask them, why didn't you try to make this better? Because all of them voted on it. Why didn't you try to make this better? So why don't you try to make it better now? Because that's something that helps everybody, homeowners and renters. If the landlords can make these improvements to their homes, and the good news is that one of the other challenges is this is not something necessarily roofers are incredibly excited about, right? Because it's additional work, right? This is not simply you buy a different kind of shingle or anything like that. It has to be inspected. To get the kind of savings that we're talking about, the kind of protection, it is a different roofing system. And so there's more inspections, they have to be trained, they have to get certification. And And so that's the other thing that we're worried about is, with only $2 million, that's 200 people.
I was gonna say, if my math right, is that only $200?
Right, so for the entire state, y'all think our roof is gonna change the way they do business?
No.
For 200 jobs? No, and we've already seen that, we've got, builder partners on the North Shore and New Orleans who are trying to do this on their own because they've got some money and they want to protect. They're trying to sell it's the Habitat partner in St. Tammany and one of our CDCs in New Orleans, Jericho Road. They also work in Houma and a couple other places, and they want to make sure that the people they sell houses to, the houses are protected. And they're having a hard time finding contractors. They have the money to pay for this, and they're having a hard time finding contractors who want to meet this standard. And so a big way to do that is if there's a big pot of money to do it. We also want, when we talk about the recovery dollars, right? So when we start talking about rebuilding in Lake Charles, y'all had some damage here, and that's one thing that we also wanted to make sure we looked at with y'all. The hurricane damage for the last couple of years. So in Lafayette, with the hurricane, I'm sorry, page 5. Thank you, Dr. Chris. Page 5. I know we're jumping around. Page 5, we have done this analysis. We got this data from FEMA. In Lafayette, y'all have about 4,400 houses with damage. Our estimate that we got this data from FEMA. We know what kind of damage they had, whether it was moderate or severe, and we have an estimate on what it costs to make that house up to the fortified standards and making the home energy efficient and things like that. And so Lafayette Parish alone, y'all need $64 million in recovery dollars for Hurricane Delta. And you see the numbers for Acadia and Evangeline and Iberia and St. Landry and St. Martin and St. Mary and Vermilion, and we've got it broken down by storm and the number of houses we're talking about. So we want to see when the money comes from the federal government that the state rebuild your houses, that these federal programs rebuild your houses with these new roofs in place so that your insurance rates will be low, that your neighbors will get this opportunity. And that also will create additional money. So you got folks whose houses have been damaged, we want to get their money, we want to get them this money, but we also need to get the money to as many people as possible. Because we live where we live. And it will bring your insurance rates down and it will make your home safer. And more likely to be here when you have to evacuate. And again, it also will allow that same insurance for renters and for property owners who are building generational wealth. Your asset will be there. This is win, win, win. So why won't our leaders do this? What are we spending our money on that's more important than where all of we live? And that is one of the big problems, and that's one of the issues that we have to grapple with. Why is this bias so entrenched? We're looking at these numbers. Most people don't think, we not gloss over. Hurricane Katrina looms large in a lot of ways, and the devastation is certainly, nothing to sneeze at. But y'all have been dealing with this too, and it's not like the people in New Orleans got everything they needed as a result of Katrina. I want to make sure y'all know that. And remind everybody that there's $30 million as of, I looked at the numbers 3 months ago, $30 million still left at the state of Louisiana in the Road Home program. Say it to you again, it is inexcusable. And they need to change it. They need to stop it. So, I keep going. We're not going to do that. We're going to pivot. We're going to stop and start taking questions.
But who benefits from the legislators voting that way and usually the money thing? Who benefits?
So it keeps the status quo in place, which benefits, it's one of the, I think it would be like conspiracy theorists and stuff like that. But people are comfortable inside the existing system. It doesn't really benefit even these idiot legislators. Even, the insurance commissioner doesn't like the way I talk about him. It would just be easier if he did his job.
Right.
So it's not really benefiting them, but they can't see their way past a different system. It's just, it's had it at this point. And then we've also got to talk about country now, today, it's evolved and it's changed, but today when you say affordable housing, the image that is conjured of is of a black woman renter with children.
With bad children.
With bad children, the welfare queen stereotype, that's right. And it is a pervasive, destructive stereotype that even people of color fall victim to. Well-meaning white people fall victim to. It does. Everybody ends up sounding like they're auditioning for the Klan when we start talking about these kinds of policies, right? When we start talking about having affordable housing in your community, when we start talking about guaranteeing housing for all, when we talk about addressing the needs of the homeless, even though I've talked to you all about things that impact your everyday lives, when a policymaker comes and says, well, I could do that, but you want me to design, don't you want me to design the program in a way so that someone doesn't steal from it, doesn't get more than they deserve, they haven't earned it, they don't deserve it, and we fall for it. We let them, oh, okay, that's all you're gonna do? You're gonna make it so that, and everybody knows somebody in their life who struggles, right? And they're like, yeah, that person could be trying a little harder, they're a little shifty, they're a little shady, and I know my struggle. I know how I have conducted myself. I know I deserve this, and that person maybe doesn't. So if they're going to X out that person, I'm okay with that. And what you have done is given them permission to screw everybody. Yeah, they have permission, they're gonna screw everybody. They're gonna screw you, hardworking person. How many of you remember in the last couple of years, if you had to leave because of the hurricanes, or you had to get help, calling in and waiting on the phone, and not getting through to anybody, and people not knowing whether or not you could get help, whether or not you qualified for help. You knew you needed help, but they didn't know whether or not they could help you. And think about that, and think about how angry you were, and how upset you were, and how disappointed you were, and how crushed you were, and how demoralized you were. And when you got somebody on the phone, were you on your best behavior? Were you nice? Were you kind? Were you pleasant to that person who, at the moment, represented that system that was hurting you? When we do the little minor income people, when we do the homeless, is we say that trauma that they dealt with, they deal with every day, that system grinds them down every day. And that they are not allowed to have those feelings. They have to somehow be perfect. And what we also do is, and we let our elected officials do it to us. Because when we design these programs and people come to talk to you all about what you can do, and they tell you, I can't help you, you don't have anything, and you pop off, security all of a sudden shows up, and everybody's gotta be escorted, and you gotta be on your best behavior as this person tells you, you are wasting your time, you are a piece of trash, and you shouldn't be here looking for a government handout, and you gotta take it. Otherwise, they're gonna throw you out of the room. That is what we do when we talk about these kinds of programs. And that is the thing that that's part of the message you've got to send to your congressmen. They're on the ballot this fall. They have got to understand this very clearly, because they don't understand this. I have been doing this for too long. I've been crisscrossing the state, talking to the community. I know Dr. Chris, and I know the folks from Vote, I know y'all care about this, but I've sat in rooms where people, after a disaster, that person says, I've seen people stand up and say, well, I don't want any of that in my community. Yeah. You don't want what? And who elected, are you king of this community? Have you been empowered to turn away every nickel of resources to help people rebuild their lives? Because I'm standing in front of you talking the way I'm talking, and you know that if things go the way I want, black people gonna be living next door to you. Right? And you don't want that. So you will be ready in your own house. Sleep in the bed of your pickup truck after your house has been destroyed. Rather than acknowledge the humanity
and that she wanted to thank God, God all over. And you were telling her that the program did not